The Boston Red Sox have been extremely successful since the beginning of 2004. Ever since that year, they've won 4 World Series championships and have made the postseason 10 times over the last 18 years. Red Sox fans have been no stranger to winning in the 21st century. That's for sure. But they have been strangers to one thing, at least. Something that the Red Sox have been really bad at, and that's elite homegrown pitching. There's been some real good pitching in Boston over the last 2 decades with all the winning teams. Guys like Pedro Martinez, Curt Schilling, Josh Beckett, Chris Sale, and David Price are some of the best starting pitchers the Red Sox have ever had. Keith Falk was a big-time closer for them. Craig Kimbrell was an elite closer in Boston. Some of the best relief pitchers the Red Sox have ever had. You know what all these names have in common, though? None of them were drafted, developed, and guys who went on to make their major league debut in a Red Sox uniform. Pedro made his debut with the Dodgers. Josh Beckett was a Marlin, Chris Sale was in the south side of Chicago, David Price was a Ray, Keith Falk played his rookie year in San Francisco and Chicago, Craig Kimbrell was electric in Atlanta for years before being traded to San Diego and then Boston, and Curt Schilling, who checks off one of the boxes because he was actually drafted by the Red Sox, was traded to Baltimore and wind up back in Boston over 15 years later when he signed with them before the 04 season. As far as guys who were drafted, developed, and made their debut with the Red Sox who accomplished a lot in Boston, there's Jon Lester, Jonathan Papelbon, and that's about it. Every Red Sox championship had plenty of homegrown hitters, like Mookie Betts, for example. He's the big one. But as far as the pitching goes, every championship pitching staff was built with mostly trades and free agent signings. In other words, the Red Sox have sucked at drafting and developing homegrown pitching talent over the last 20 years. It's harsh to say, but it's true. However, that is certainly changing, because the Red Sox have called up their #1 pitching prospect. His name is Brayan Bello, and he is not just any top pitching prospect. Brayan Bello was born and raised in the Dominican Republic, and when the 2015 international MLB signing period came around, Bello didn't impress enough to get a deal with anyone, with the same thing going on to happen in 2016. But in 2017, a team finally gave him a shot, as the Boston Red Sox would give the skinny 18-year-old just $28,000 to join their organization. And on he went to the low levels of their minor league system in 2018, throwing 3 innings for the Gulf Coast League and 64 1/3 innings for the Dominican Summer League, putting up great numbers there. But then 2019 rolled around, and Bello didn't show too much to be excited about in Low A Greenville, throwing 117 2/3 innings with an ERA near 5.5. That's bad. And then the 2020 pandemic happened, there was no minor league season, and Bello was pretty much all but forgotten. After missing out on a true minor league season in 2020, Bello returned to Greenville, which was now Single A, in 2021, throwing 31 2/3 innings with a 2.27 ERA, getting promoted to Double A Portland. And although not doing quite as well there with an ERA near 5, he did show some promise with the swing and miss stuff, striking out a lot of guys. By the time the year ended, Bello had certainly improved from where he left off in 2019, but how close really was he to making it, if ever? At least with the Red Sox. Well, Chaim Bloom and the Red Sox front office saw enough promise and potential in the 22-year-old in 2021, protecting him in the Rule 5 draft and putting Bello on their 40-man roster. That showed how much they believed in Bello, putting him on their 40-man, as that's a big deal. After pitching a little bit during spring training, Bello started the 2022 season back in Double A Portland. 3 months later, he's a big leaguer. Here's how it happened. Brayan Bello became a man on a mission in 2022, pitching dominantly to a 1.60 ERA in over 30 innings to start the year in Double-A, striking out 42 hitters, getting called up to Triple-A Worcester, and he only showed more improvement there. At the Triple-A level with the Woo Sox and Worcester, Brayan Bello threw 51 1/3 innings, striking out 72 hitters and pitching to a 2.81 ERA. It was incredible to watch, and it was becoming more and more obvious by the start that Bello was ready to move on from the minor leagues. He's big league ready, with Alex Cora talking about Bello as a top candidate to start on Wednesday against the Tampa Bay Rays, and hours later it became official, as Bello was informed he'd been called up to the Boston Red Sox. This is a massive deal for the Red Sox and their fans. Why? Because Brayan Bello is one of the most hyped and most exciting pitching prospects for Red Sox fans in the team's history. And it's really impressive how quick that came to be. At the start of this very season, if you asked Red Sox fans who Brayan Bello was, most probably couldn't tell you who he was or recognize his face. Yet, within a couple of months' time, his dominance in the minor leagues got people talking. And Bello is now one of the hot topics in the city of Boston. Nobody knew who he was when he was signed as an 18-year-old. No team was really willing to give him a shot, and up until this very year, you could argue that Brayan Bello was an unknown person. But this man worked his tail off, pitching well enough to join the top 100 prospect list, jump all the way to the number 44 prospect in all of baseball, become the Red Sox #1 pitching prospect, and is now being called up to Boston. It's incredible to see how far he's come in such a short span of time, and the Red Sox fans all over are ecstatic to see this man pitch. People are comparing this man to Pedro Martinez, with Bello himself even saying that he eventually wants to be even better than him. That's how high of a standard he has for himself. But don't get it wrong, and don't take it in a cocky manner. Brayan is one of the more nicest and humble human beings you'd ever meet. This is a big deal for the Red Sox, as they don't have a great history of calling up prize pitching prospects, but they have someone now, and he certainly has the potential to become a legend in Boston. You know by now how good of a pitcher he is, but if you want to know the kind of person that Brayan Bello is, here's a good example. In the very beginning of June, I got the pleasure and privilege of getting a media pass at Polar Park in Worcester, Massachusetts, and was able to see Bello pitch. Afterward, I was also able to go down in the dugout and talk to Bello for a bit, and then something serious went down. Alright, last thing, water bottle flipping. Let's do it. First one to hit it. Alright, let's do it. We'll hopefully keep. Alright, let's do it. Let's do it. Alright, come on. Oh! Come on, we got this. Alright, come on. I got you. Oh. Almost. This man is such a goofy, fun, and happy person, while also someone who happens to be the most prized and highly touted Red Sox arm in years. Welcome to Boston, Brayan Bello.